I want you to listen to me carefully today because what I'm about to share with you is not comfortable. It is not the kind of thing that people stand up and cheer about in the moment. But give it time. Let it sit with you. Let it work on you the way a good seed works in good soil. Quietly, invisibly, and then all at once. Because what I'm going to talk about today has the power to change the entire trajectory of your life. Not next year, not next month, starting today. Starting the moment you truly understand what I'm telling you. The subject is people pleasing, and I want to be very direct with you. People pleasing is one of the most destructive habits a human being can develop. It doesn't look destructive, that's the problem. It looks kind, it looks generous, it looks like cooperation and harmony and getting along. But underneath the surface, people pleasing is a slow erosion of everything you are, everything you could become, and everything God or the universe or life itself put you here to accomplish. Now let me start at the beginning, because I've learned over the years that if you want to understand the solution, you first have to understand the problem. And the problem with people-pleasing is that it begins very early. It begins when we're young, when we learn that approval feels good, when we learn that a nod from a parent, a smile from a teacher, a compliment from a peer lights something up inside of us, and there's nothing wrong with that. Approval is a natural human desire. We are social creatures. We need connection. We need belonging. That is not the problem. The problem begins when we start making decisions, not based on what we believe, not based on what we value, not based on where we want to go, but based on what other people think of us. The problem begins when we sacrifice our own direction in order to secure someone else's opinion. That's when approval seeking crosses the line and becomes people-pleasing. And most people cross that line so gradually, so quietly, that they never even notice it happening. Think about your own life for a moment. Think about the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Think about the last time you kept your mouth shut in a meeting because you were afraid of what your colleagues might think. Think about the last time you chose a path, a career, a relationship, a lifestyle. Not because it resonated with something deep inside you, but because it would make someone else comfortable. Because it would earn you a round of applause from the people in your circle. Think about those moments. They're not rare, are they? For most people, those moments happen every single day. And I want to ask you something. Where has that gotten you? Where has that constant accommodation, that constant shrinking, that constant measurement of yourself against the opinions of others, where has it taken you? Are you fulfilled? Are you on fire about your life? Are you waking up in the morning with a sense of purpose and direction and meaning? Or are you tired? Are you quietly frustrated? Are you living a life that looks acceptable from the outside but feels hollow on the inside? That hollowness, that is the price of people-pleasing. That is what you pay every time you trade your own conviction for someone else's comfort. Now here's something I want you to understand about human nature, and I want you to hear this very carefully. You cannot please everyone. It is not possible. It has never been possible. No one in the history of humanity has ever managed to please everyone, and no one ever will. This is not a pessimistic statement. This is simply the nature of people. People are different. People have different values, different expectations, different needs, different preferences. What pleases one person will inevitably disappoint another. What satisfies one will frustrate someone else. This is the reality of a diverse world. And so when you make it your mission to please everyone, you have taken on an impossible job. You are trying to satisfy an audience that cannot be satisfied collectively. You are pouring water into a bucket with holes in the bottom and wondering why it never fills up. And the tragedy is not just that you fail at the task. The tragedy is what the attempt costs you. Because in trying to please everyone, you please no one truly, least of all yourself. I remember early in my career, a mentor said something to me that I never forgot. He said, "Jim, if you try to be everything to everyone, you will end up being nothing to anyone." At the time, I nodded and thought I understood. But it wasn't until I watched it play out in my own life and in the lives of people I observed over the years that I truly grasped the depth of that statement. When you spread yourself across every expectation and every preference and every demand that the world places on you, you dilute yourself. You become thin. You become unremarkable. You become a person of no particular substance because you have traded your substance away piece by piece in exchange for approval. The person who stands for everything stands for nothing. The person who tries to please everyone pleases no one in any meaningful way. This is a law, not a suggestion, a law. Now, I want to talk about what focusing on yourself really means, because this is where people sometimes get confused. When I say focus on yourself, I am not saying become selfish. I am not saying become inconsiderate. I am not saying stop caring about other people. That would be a misunderstanding of everything I believe. I spent my entire career talking about service, about relationships, about adding value to the lives of others. That is still true. What I am saying is this: you must first be someone before you can give something. You must first have direction before you can help someone else find theirs. You must first be rooted before you can offer shade. And the only way to become that person, the only way to develop that rootedness, that substance, that genuine value, is to stop outsourcing your decisions to the gallery and start consulting the compass inside you. Focusing on yourself means knowing what you value. It means knowing what you want. It means making decisions from the inside out rather than the outside in. It means building your life around your own considered judgment rather than around the shifting, fickle, often contradictory opinions of the people around you. Let me give you a picture of two people. Two people, same starting point, same basic circumstances. The first person spends their life trying to please everyone. They take the job their parents approve of. They date the person their friends think is appropriate. They live in the neighborhood that earns respect from their colleagues. They dress the way the culture says to dress. They voice the opinions they think will get them the most agreement. They smile when they don't feel like smiling. They stay silent when they have something important to say. And they do this day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Now ask yourself, what does that person's life look like at the end? What do they have to show for all that accommodation? They have a life that was designed by committee, a life that doesn't quite fit them, a life full of things they were supposed to want. And the saddest part, they often can't even articulate what they themselves wanted because they spent so long ignoring that voice that it eventually went quiet. The second person takes a different path. They also want to be liked. Of course they do, they're human, but they understand that being liked by everyone is an illusion, and they choose instead to be true. They ask themselves difficult questions. What do I actually value? What do I actually want to build? What kind of person do I genuinely want to become? They disappoint some people along the way. Their parents don't always understand. Their friends sometimes shake their heads. There are moments of loneliness, of doubt, of wondering if they've made a mistake. But they build something. They build something real. They build a life that fits them like a custom suit, not like something they found in a discount bin that was close enough. They develop genuine skills, genuine relationships, genuine fulfillment. And when you ask them at the end what they're proud of, they don't hesitate. They know exactly what they built and why. Which of those two people do you want to be? I think I know the answer, but knowing isn't enough. You have to choose it. You have to choose it every single day. Now let's talk about the opinions of other people because I think we need to put them in their proper place. I am not telling you to become arrogant. I am not telling you to stop listening. There is tremendous wisdom available from other people, and a fool is someone who refuses to learn from anyone but themselves. Wisdom says, gather input, seek counsel, learn from those who have walked the road before you. That is smart. That is necessary. But there is a difference between seeking wisdom and seeking approval. There is a difference between learning from others and living for others. When you go to a mentor and say, I want to achieve this goal, what do you know that could help me get there? That is wisdom seeking. That is powerful. When you go to the crowd and say, tell me what you think I should want and I'll want that, that is approval seeking. That is surrender. The opinions of others are useful only to the degree that they help you think more clearly about your own path. The moment you start using the opinions of others as a substitute for your own judgment, you've given away your power. And power once given away is very difficult to reclaim. And here's what I've noticed. The people who are most worth listening to, the people whose opinions carry genuine weight, those people don't want you to simply agree with them. They want you to think. They want you to reason. They want you to come back with your own considered perspective. The wisest people I ever knew, they were never looking for yes men. They were looking for genuine engagement. And you can only offer genuine engagement when you have done the work of forming genuine views. So ironically, when you stop trying to please people and start thinking for yourself, you become more valuable in conversation, not less. You become someone worth talking to, not just someone who nods along. I want to address something that I know is on some of your minds right now. Some of you are thinking, but Jim, what about relationships? What about family? What about the people I love? Surely I should care what they think. Surely their opinions matter. Of course they matter. Of course they do. I am not suggesting that you walk through life indifferent to the feelings of the people you love. That would be a terrible existence and a terrible way to treat people. Love requires consideration. Love requires sacrifice. Love requires putting others first in genuine ways. But here's the distinction I want you to make. There's a difference between choosing to serve someone out of love, which is noble, and shrinking yourself because you're afraid of their disapproval, which is fear. Love is a choice made from strength. People-pleasing is a reaction made from insecurity. They can look similar on the outside, but they feel completely different on the inside, and over time, they produce completely different results. When you love someone and you make a sacrifice for them, you know why you're doing it. You've thought it through. It aligns with your values. You feel good about the decision even when it's difficult. That is healthy. That is right. When you shrink yourself because you're afraid of what someone will think, you often feel resentful. You feel hollow. You feel like something was taken from you even though you technically gave it willingly. That resentment, that is the signal. That is your inner self telling you that what just happened wasn't love. It was compliance. It was fear dressed up as kindness. Learn to tell the difference. Start paying attention to how you feel after you make decisions. Do you feel clean or do you feel compromised? That feeling is data. It's important data. Now, I want to talk to you about identity because I think this is at the heart of everything. The reason people-pleasing is so destructive is because it slowly dismantles your sense of who you are. When you consistently make decisions based on other people's opinions rather than your own values, you begin to lose touch with yourself. You begin to forget what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually want. You become a reflection of other people's expectations rather than an expression of your own nature. And when you don't know who you are, you have no foundation. You become what the philosophers call inconsistent, not because you're dishonest, but because you have no center. You shift with every new social wind. You agree with whoever you spoke to last. You believe what the last convincing voice told you to believe. And that's a terrifying way to live because you can never feel settled. You can never feel at home in your own skin. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is clarity about who you are. And I mean real clarity, not the surface level stuff, not your job title, not your nationality, not your role in your family. I mean deep clarity. What do you believe? What do you value? What are you willing to stand for, even when standing costs you something? What kind of person do you want to be when no one is watching? Those questions are not easy questions. Working through them takes time and honest reflection. But the work is absolutely worth it because once you have clarity about who you are, everything else becomes easier. Decisions become easier because you have a standard to measure them against. Relationships become easier because you know what you're looking for. Success becomes easier because you know what success means to you, not to your neighbor or your parents or your culture, to you. The person who knows themselves is not easily swayed. The person who knows themselves doesn't need constant external validation because they have internal validation. They have already answered the important questions. They don't need the crowd to tell them who they are because they already know. Now let's talk about the courage required for this because make no mistake, it takes courage to stop trying to please everyone. Real, genuine courage. Because when you stop performing for the crowd, when you stop adjusting yourself to match every social environment, when you start showing up as you actually are and saying what you actually think and pursuing what you actually value, some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to be confused. Some people are going to be critical. Some people, frankly, are going to walk away. And that's painful. I won't pretend it isn't. One of the deepest human pains is the experience of disapproval from people whose approval you once sought. When you change your behavior, when you start living more authentically, some of the people around you will feel unsettled because your change challenges them. Your willingness to be yourself holds up a mirror to their own unwillingness to do the same. And not everyone likes what they see in that mirror. But here's what I want you to remember in those moments. The people who walk away because you became more yourself, those people were not connected to you. They were connected to the performance you were putting on. They were connected to the version of you that was easy and accommodating and always agreeable. They didn't love you. They loved your compliance. And when you stop being compliant, they lose interest. That might sound harsh, but ask yourself, is that really the kind of relationship you want? Is that really the kind of connection worth preserving? I don't think so. I think the relationships worth having are the ones that can survive your authenticity. The ones where someone looks at the real you and chooses to stay. Those relationships are rarer, but they are infinitely more valuable. You could have 1,000 shallow connections built on performance, or you could have a handful of deep connections built on truth. I know which one feeds the soul. And here is the beautiful irony that I want you to hold on to. When you stop trying to please everyone, when you stop performing, when you start being genuinely yourself, the right people come closer because authenticity is magnetic. People can feel it. There is something about a person who is genuinely themselves, who has real convictions, who says what they mean and means what they say. There is something compelling about that. It draws people in because everyone is surrounded by performers. Everyone is surrounded by people who are saying what they think they're supposed to say, doing what they think they're supposed to do, being what they think they're supposed to be. And in a world full of performances, a genuine person stands out like a light in a dark room. People gravitate toward that light. They trust it. They respect it. They want to be near it. So the very thing you're afraid will push people away, being authentically yourself, is the very thing that will attract the right people to you. This is one of life's great paradoxes. The more you try to be what everyone else wants, the less compelling you become. The more you become yourself, the more genuinely attractive you are. Let me talk about success for a moment, because I've spent a lifetime thinking about what success really means and what produces it. And I want to tell you something. I have never met a truly successful person who built their success on the foundation of trying to please everyone. Not one. Every person I've ever known or studied who achieved something of lasting value, they had a clarity of purpose that made them somewhat indifferent to criticism. Not blind to it, not dismissive of all feedback, but fundamentally unshaken by it. Think about any great innovator in history. Think about any artist who created something that changed the culture. Think about any entrepreneur who built something that revolutionized an industry. Think about any leader who stood up in a moment of crisis and pointed in a direction that everyone else was afraid to go. Every single one of those people at some critical moment had to choose between what was popular and what they believed was right. And they chose what they believed was right. Every significant achievement in human history required someone to stop caring about what the crowd thought and start caring about what was true. Every great invention was once called impossible by people who didn't want to be disturbed. Every great idea was once called foolish by people who were comfortable with the way things were. And do you know what the people pleasers of the world were doing during all of that? They were agreeing with whatever the consensus was. They were fitting in. They were making sure everyone around them approved, and they were building nothing that lasted. I'm not saying you have to be an inventor or a revolutionary. I'm saying that whatever your particular calling is, whatever the thing is that you are meant to build and contribute, you will not be able to build it if you're constantly checking to see whether the crowd approves, because the crowd doesn't always understand what you're building until after it's built. The crowd often doesn't have the vision that you have, and that's not a criticism of the crowd, mate. That's just the nature of vision. Vision sees things before others see them, and if you need the crowd to validate your vision before you'll pursue it, you will never pursue it. The vision always comes first. The validation comes later, sometimes much later, sometimes never in your own lifetime. But the building happens, and the building matters, regardless of what the gallery says while it's in progress. Now I want to talk to you about your potential, because this is what this is ultimately about. Not philosophy, not theory, your specific, individual, unrepeatable potential. Every one of you sitting here, every one of you has a particular set of gifts, a particular set of experiences, a particular perspective that no one else in the world has in exactly the same combination. That is not an accident. That is design. Whether you believe in God or in nature or in the universe, the fact of your uniqueness is undeniable. There is no one else exactly like you. There has never been anyone exactly like you. There will never be anyone exactly like you. That uniqueness is not a burden. It is a treasure. It is the source of your specific contribution to this world, the particular way you see things, the particular problems you're equipped to solve, the particular beauty you're positioned to create. Those things come from your specific nature, from who you actually are. But here's the tragedy of people-pleasing. When you spend your life trying to be what everyone else wants you to be, you sand down that uniqueness. You round off the edges. You homogenize yourself into something more agreeable, more palatable, more average. And in the process, you eliminate the very thing that makes you valuable. You eliminate the very thing that would allow you to make your particular contribution. The world doesn't need another version of the average. The world doesn't need more people who are just agreeable enough to get along with everyone and interesting enough to offend no one. The world needs you, the actual you, the one with the strong opinions and the strange passions and the unconventional ideas and the specific vision that no one else quite has. That's what your potential is. That's what you're protecting when you choose to focus on yourself rather than on pleasing the crowd. You're not being selfish. You're being responsible. You're being a steward of the gift you were given. And to bury that gift, to cover it over with layers of performance and accommodation and compliance, that is one of the deepest forms of waste I can imagine. Because at least if you spend money unwisely, the money can be replaced. But the time you spend performing rather than being, that time is gone. The years you spend shrinking so that others are comfortable, you cannot get those years back. And the contribution you could have made but didn't make because you were too worried about what people would think, that contribution is lost. The world is poorer for it. That's not meant to make you feel guilty. That's meant to make you feel the weight of the opportunity you still have. Because if you're here, if you're listening, if something in what I'm saying is landing, then you still have time. You still have the ability to make a different choice, starting now. Let me address perfectionism for a moment because I see a connection between people-pleasing and perfectionism that I think is important. Many people who struggle with people-pleasing also struggle with perfectionism. And the connection is this: both habits are driven by the fear of judgment. The perfectionist delays and over-refines and never quite finishes because they're afraid that if they put their work out there, someone will find fault with it. The people-pleaser constantly adjusts and accommodates and never quite commits to their own path because they're afraid that if they show who they really are, someone will disapprove. Both habits are fundamentally about fear, and both habits have the same solution, and which is action, forward movement, imperfect, authentic, genuine forward movement. You will not produce something perfect. I'm sorry if no one told you that before. Nothing you create will be perfect. No path you choose will be perfect. No version of yourself you present to the world will be perfect. Perfect is not available. Perfect is a concept, not a reality. And chasing perfect is just another way of avoiding the discomfort of being seen. What is available to you is real. What is available is genuine effort directed by genuine values toward genuine goals. What is available is the satisfaction of building something true, even if it's imperfect. And I will tell you from experience, that satisfaction is extraordinary. It is one of the best things a human being can feel. It is the feeling of a life that is being lived rather than merely managed. Stop waiting until you're certain everyone will approve. They won't. They never will. That day is not coming. Go build something anyway. Now I want to talk about discipline, because focusing on yourself is not just an attitude. It requires discipline. It requires a set of practices that you repeat consistently, not just once in a moment of inspiration, but every day, whether you feel like it or not. The discipline begins with self-awareness. You have to develop the habit of checking in with yourself. Before you make a decision, ask, am I doing this because it aligns with my values and my goals, or am I doing this because I want someone's approval? That question, asked consistently and answered honestly, will reveal a tremendous amount about what's driving your choices. The discipline continues with boundaries, and I know that word gets used a lot, but what I mean is very concrete. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are declarations of what you will and will not do, based on your own considered judgment about what serves your growth and your values. When someone asks you to do something that violates your values, you say no. And you do not need to deliver a lengthy explanation or apology. A simple, clear, respectful no is sufficient. The ability to say no without drowning in guilt, that is a form of discipline. And it is one that most people need to develop. The discipline also involves protecting your time and your energy, because time and energy are your most important resources. You cannot do everything that everyone asks of you. You cannot attend every event, fulfill every request, respond to every demand. You have to choose. And the discipline is choosing deliberately, choosing based on what matters most to you, rather than simply saying yes to whatever arrives first and leaving nothing for your own priorities. And the discipline involves monitoring your own thoughts, because the people-pleasing habit does not just live in behavior, it lives in the mind. It lives in the constant internal commentary that says, what will they think? What if they disapprove? What if they're disappointed? What if they like me less? Learning to recognize those thoughts when they arise and not automatically obey them, that is a mental discipline. It doesn't mean you never hear those thoughts. It means they don't have veto power over your choices. Think about what it would mean for your life if you practice these disciplines consistently for 1 year, just 1 year, making decisions based on your values, saying no when no is the honest answer, protecting your time for what matters most, quieting the approval-seeking voice in your mind. What would be different in your life? I think the answer would surprise you, because growth compounds. Small, consistent choices add up to enormous changes over time. The person who makes 20 small decisions a day based on their own values rather than on approval-seeking, over the course of a year, that's 7,000 decisions. 7,000 times they chose their own direction over someone else's expectation. That accumulation changes you. It changes your confidence. It changes your clarity. It changes your capability. It changes your life. Let me speak to you now about the people in your life who benefit from your people-pleasing, because there are some, and I want you to look at this clearly. When you consistently place other people's comfort above your own truth, you create a dynamic. You train the people around you to expect that from you. You train them to expect that their preferences will always take priority, that you will always accommodate, that your own needs are secondary. And some of those people, not all but some, will take advantage of that dynamic, often without even being fully conscious that they're doing it. This is not a reason to be cynical about people. It's simply a reason to understand human nature. We adapt to our environments. The people in your life have adapted to an environment in which you are always accommodating. When you begin to change that, when you begin to set your own direction and hold to it, there will be resistance. Some people will push back. Some people will express disappointment or frustration. Some will suggest that you've changed, that you're not yourself anymore, that you're being difficult. Here's what I want you to know about that resistance. That resistance audience is confirmation that you're doing the right thing, because the reason they're resistant is that the new version of you is less convenient for them, and if someone's primary objection to your growth is that it's less convenient for them, that tells you something important about that relationship. The people who genuinely love you and want what's best for you, they will adjust. They will be a little surprised, perhaps. They may need some time, but ultimately they will respect the change. They will recognize something admirable in it, even if they don't always say so, because genuine love wants good things for the person you love, and a more authentic, more purposeful, more alive version of you is good, not just for you, but for everyone who is genuinely connected to you. I want to talk to you about what self-respect looks like in practice, because I think self-respect is the foundation of everything I'm describing. You cannot focus on yourself in the healthy, productive way I'm talking about unless you have a fundamental respect for yourself, unless you regard your own judgment, your own values, your own time and energy and gifts as worthy of protection. Self-respect is not arrogance. Arrogance is the belief that you are better than others. Self-respect is simply the belief that you are worthy of your own consideration, worthy of your own loyalty, worthy of a life that reflects your actual values and aspirations. Many people who struggle with people-pleasing have a deficit of self-respect. Somewhere along the way, they learned that their own preferences were less important than others. Maybe a parent communicated that your feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. Maybe an early experience taught you that speaking up led to punishment. Maybe a culture or religion or social environment gave you the message that putting yourself first was wrong or selfish or sinful. And those messages took root, and now you carry them. And every time you're tempted to stand up for yourself, every time you're tempted to say what you actually think or pursue what you actually want, those messages push back. They say, who are you to want that? Who are you to prioritize yourself? Who are you to disappoint people? I want to address those messages directly. Those messages are wrong. I don't care where they came from or how long you've been carrying them. They are wrong. You have inherent worth. Your judgment matters. Your time matters. Your gifts matter. Your direction matters. And you have both the right and the responsibility to take yourself seriously. Taking yourself seriously is not selfishness. It is the prerequisite for contribution. A person who does not take themselves seriously cannot be taken seriously by others in any lasting way. A person who does not value their own gifts cannot develop them. A person who does not protect their own direction cannot make the contribution they were put here to make. You owe it, not just to yourself, but to the world, to take yourself seriously. Let me tell you about what I have observed in people who made the shift from people-pleasing to genuine self-direction. I've seen it many times over the course of my career, and it is always a remarkable transformation. At first, there is discomfort. There is always discomfort at the beginning of change. The old patterns fight back. The old voices get louder for a while before they get quieter. There are moments of doubt and second guessing and wondering if this is really worth it. But then something begins to shift. As the person makes more decisions from their own values, as they experience the satisfaction of being true to themselves, as they see that the world doesn't end when they disappoint someone, their confidence begins to grow. Not the brittle, performance-based confidence that collapses under criticism, but a deeper, more durable confidence. The confidence that comes from knowing yourself and trusting yourself. And as that confidence grows, something interesting happens to their relationships. The relationships that were based on compliance tend to fade or end, but the relationships that survive, the ones that deepen, those become something extraordinary, because now there are two real people in the relationship, not one real person and one performer. Two people with genuine views, genuine feelings, genuine investment. And conversations become real. Connections become real. The support they receive becomes real because it's given to the real them, not to the version of them that the other person found convenient. And their work changes. They begin to bring their actual perspective to their work. They stop hiding their ideas for fear of criticism. They start taking the risks that their genuine judgment tells them to take. And some of those risks don't work out. That's fine, that's learning. But some of them produce results that the compliant, approval-seeking version of them never could have produced, because the approval-seeking version would never have taken the risk in the first place. Their whole life begins to gain a coherence it lacked before, because now all the parts are being directed by the same center, their own values, their own vision, their own considered judgment. Rather than being pulled in different directions by different people's expectations, they're moving in one direction, their own. And here's what they tell me, the ones who've made this shift. They say, I should have done this sooner. Every one of them says that, I should have done this sooner. Well, you're here now, so let's make sure you do it now. I want to spend some time on the question of legacy because I think it matters. I think it's one of the most powerful motivators a human being has. And I want to ask you, when your life is complete, what do you want to have contributed? What do you want to have built? What do you want the people who knew you to say about you? I'll tell you what I think people rarely say at a memorial. They rarely say, he was so good at agreeing with everyone. She never made anyone uncomfortable. He always did did exactly what we expected of him. Those things might be said, and they might even be meant kindly, but they're not the things that move people. They're not the things that make a life feel like it mattered. What moves people at the end of a life is something real, something specific, something that could only have come from that particular person, with their particular gifts, their particular convictions, their particular courage. The legacy that matters is always personal. It's always authentic. It's always the product of someone who was willing to be themselves despite the risks. So if you want to leave something that matters, if you want your particular time on this earth to have made a genuine difference, then you have to start from the inside. You have to start from who you actually are. And you have to have the courage to build from there. That's not easy. I never said it was easy, but I've also never met anyone who did the hard work of becoming genuinely themselves, who looked back on it with regret. That's the beautiful thing about this path. The discomfort is at the beginning. The reward is everywhere else. Let me talk to you about comparison because it's related to all of this, and I think it deserves its own attention. One of the greatest enemies of focusing on yourself is the habit of constant comparison. We live in a world that makes comparison very easy. Social platforms, media, the constant visibility of other people's highlight reels. And comparison is almost always corrosive when it's done in a certain way. There's a healthy form of comparison, looking at someone who's further along than you and using their example as inspiration and instruction. What did they do? What choices did they make? What can I learn from their path that might help me on mine? That's useful. That's wisdom. But the comparison most people engage in is different. It's the comparison that says, look at how far ahead they are. Look at what they have that I don't have. Look at how much better their life seems. That comparison doesn't inspire. It deflates. It makes you feel behind, inadequate, not enough. And here's the particular cruelty of that feeling. It pushes you right back into people-pleasing. Because when you feel inadequate, you look for external validation to compensate. You look for someone to tell you that you're doing okay, that you measure up, that you're acceptable. And the search for that reassurance leads you right back to the approval-seeking behavior we've been talking about. So comparison and people-pleasing feed each other. They're part of the same cycle of looking outside yourself for a sense of worth. The way out of that cycle is to redirect your measuring stick. Stop measuring yourself against other people. Start measuring yourself against your own potential, your own past, your own values. The only relevant question is not, am I ahead of them? The relevant question is, am I becoming who I'm capable of being? Am I moving in the direction that aligns with my values? Am I doing the things that will make my life at its end something I'm genuinely proud of? Those are the right questions. And only you can answer them because only you know what you're capable of, what you value, what your particular vision is. No one else can measure you accurately by those standards because no one else knows what those standards are. The only person qualified to evaluate your life is you. Now, I'm going to say something that might be counterintuitive, but I want you to hear it all the way through. Focusing on yourself is one of the most generous things you can do for other people. I know that sounds strange. Let me explain. When you don't focus on yourself, when you don't develop yourself, clarify your values, build your capacity, pursue your genuine potential, you have less to give. You become someone who is spread thin, operating from a deficit, constantly drained by the effort of maintaining performances for different audiences. A person like that cannot give generously. They can give superficially. They can perform generosity, but genuine, deep, life-changing generosity requires that you have something to give. When you do focus on yourself, when you do develop your gifts, clarify your values, build your capacity, you become someone with genuine resources to offer. Your wisdom deepens, your capability grows, your perspective broadens, and you are able to give from that depth rather than scraping together surface-level gestures. The person who has truly worked on themselves is the person who can walk into a room and change the energy. They're the person who can sit with someone in crisis and actually help, not just sympathize. They're the person whose words carry weight because they come from genuine experience and genuine conviction. They're the person whose life is an example that actually inspires others to change. You become more valuable to the world by becoming more yourself. That is not selfishness. That is stewardship. Think about the people who have mattered most in your life. Think about the people who genuinely helped you, genuinely inspired you, genuinely changed the direction of your thinking or your path. Were those people people pleasers? Were they people who had spent their lives accommodating everyone around them? Or were they people with substance? People who knew what they believed, who had done the work, who were genuinely and deeply themselves? I think you know the answer. The people who changed your life were real. They were whole. They were the product of focused investment in their own growth, and that's exactly why they had something to give you. You can be that person for someone else, but only if you're willing to do the work on yourself first. Let me bring this toward toward its close by talking about the starting point, because I think that's what people need most. Not more philosophy, not more inspiration, but a clear sense of where to begin, because if you've been in the people-pleasing pattern for years or decades, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you don't even know where the real you is anymore, underneath all the layers of performance. The starting point is simple, but it requires honesty. And the honesty required is the kind that you practice in private, in quiet, with no audience. Which is fitting, because this whole journey is about releasing the audience. Ask yourself what you actually think about the things that matter most in your life. Your career. Do you actually find it meaningful? Or have you convinced yourself that you do because other people approve of it? Your relationships. Are they genuinely nourishing? Or have you stayed in them because leaving would disappoint someone? Your daily habits and how you spend your time. Do they reflect what you actually value, or do they reflect what you think is expected of you? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the most important questions you will ever ask yourself. And the answers, the honest answers, are the foundation on which a genuine life can be built. You may find that much of what you've built is genuinely yours. That's wonderful. Honor it. Invest in it more deeply. You may find that some of what you've built doesn't fit. That's also information. That's not cause for despair. That's cause for course correction. And course corrections are always available to you as long as you're alive. Start today. Not dramatically. Not by burning down everything you've built. Start quietly. Start by noticing in one situation today whether your decision is coming from your values or from your desire for approval. Just notice. That awareness, practiced consistently, is the beginning of everything. Then, in one situation, just one, make the choice your values point to, even if it costs you some approval. See what happens. Usually what happens is far less dramatic than you feared. The disapproval, when it comes, is rarely as devastating as you imagined. And the satisfaction of the authentic choice is usually far more nourishing than you expected. One authentic choice leads to another, and over time, the accumulation of authentic choices shapes a life, your life, the one you were actually here to live. I have been in rooms with many thousands of people over the course of my career, and the question that has always interested me most is not who they are right now, but who they could become, because I have seen what human beings are capable of when they commit to genuine growth. I have seen people transform completely, not their circumstances first, but themselves first, and then their circumstances. I have seen people discover capacities in themselves they never suspected they had. I have seen people build lives of meaning and contribution and genuine fulfillment from circumstances far more challenging than most people in this room are facing. And I want to tell you that potential is not reserved for a special few. It is not available only to the naturally gifted or the uniquely fortunate. It is available to anyone who is willing to do the work, anyone who is willing to get serious about who they are and who they're becoming, anyone who is willing to stop performing and start being. You are capable of more than you know. Your life can be more meaningful than it currently is. The contribution you're positioned to make is real and it matters, but none of that happens as long as you're spending your energy trying to be what everyone else wants you to be. Stop trying to please everyone. Not because other people don't matter, they do. Not because relationships aren't important, they are. But because the truest gift you can give to the world is the fully developed, fully authentic, fully committed version of yourself. And that person can only emerge if you're willing to protect the space in which they grow. Focus on yourself. Know who you are, know what you value, know where you're going, make your choices from that center. Hold your direction when the winds of other people's expectations blow against you. And trust that the authentic path, however uncertain it feels, leads somewhere real, somewhere your own, somewhere worth going. That is the life I'm inviting you to build. Not someone else's version of a good life, yours. The specific, unrepeatable, extraordinary life that only you can live. Don't waste it pleasing everyone. Go live it.